We're joined now by our first guest today, U.S. Representative Brenda Lawrence from the 14th Congressional District, with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Representative Lawrence, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, and good morning to everyone. It's a beautiful day, and stay safe and stay cool, too.
Yeah, another beautiful day in Michigan, another hot day in the state of Michigan. It's been the status quo lately. So, Representative Lawrence, we recently spoke to Senator Gary Peters about the Federal CARES Act and some of the surprising
Yes.
findings about the distribution of funds across the union. Now coming down the pike is potential for another supplemental, the HEROES Act. Are you aware
Yeah.
what this bill would include, and how would this aid help local communities in Michigan?
Yes, it's critical. When we did the first stimulus package, it was the CARES Act, and we made sure we did funding for small businesses. We did funding for testing for our hospitals, for the Postal Service, and we for PPEs. And now we know that as we continue, this virus is lasting way longer than anyone anticipated, that this is the HEROES Act. And if I could just read some of the
Sure.
provisions of the HEROES Act. Um, we are looking at the broadband access. So many people found out this virus has ripped the scab off of so many social issues in America. One is the lack of broadband or the lack of access to the internet. We sent our children home and said, learn from home. We sent people home and said, work remotely. In some cases, that just was not a reality. So it will provide $1.5 billion to address the homework gap, is what we're calling it. And it would help for connectability, infrastructure that's needed in rural America. They were hit the hardest, rural America and urban America. Our suburban communities seem to fare pretty well, but we know the infrastructure wasn't even there for the rural communities and urban. The Postal Service, it would be emergency funding. As you know, the Postal Service has not been exempt from this pandemic. The employees, they had to continue to work. They were essential workers. And the Postal Service need to invest in this infrastructure again for us to be able to address the concern about voting during this pandemic. Fewer people are volunteering to work the polls, so there's fewer polling locations. And in addition to that, the Postal Service need to invest in upgrading their infrastructure as well. This is the thing that is, to me, is so critical about the HEROES bill. We know that cities and municipalities and state government, county governments has been hit hard. I like to give the example of the city hall shut down, so construction shut down. There's a revenue flow that comes from permits that are paid for to municipalities when there is construction and building. We also know that gambling facilities, the bars shut down, the fees that are paid for liquor license and other things that are usually a part of that is the revenue that cities bring in. The amount of first responders to nursing homes, to for at home calls during this time where there's so much illness. So we know that cities and states have been hit really hard. And so they have been all, whether they're Republican or Democrat. And that's the thing I loved about when I was the mayor of Southfield for 14 years. We did not say, I'm a Democratic mayor, I'm a Republican mayor. You're a mayor because you have responsibilities to take care of every citizen. And so the cities will get $1 trillion. I'm sorry, the cities, the states, and local governments will get $1 trillion. The state relief fund will be 500 million. The local will be 375. To give you an example, the city of Detroit will get 1.68 billion. So think about the casinos, which make up a large bulk of the revenue that's coming into the city of Detroit. And they had that went away overnight because they were shut down. They're still shut down. And so we are really fighting hard. This was passed through the House. It's in Mitch McConnell's graveyard right now. But we hear that there is some energy to start processing the the relief that we would get in the Heroes Act. It would also provide additional money, 75 billion for the virus testing. I just heard you talking about that, and the tracing. The tracing is one of the areas that is increasing the amount of testing. To give you an example, I feel that these recent events over the holidays where people just threw caution to the wind and went back to business as normal. And if someone in those groups tests positive, we're able to trace and find the other people who are in those areas and say, you need to be tested as well. Um, Small businesses and nonprofits, we will continue to provide funding for them. Um, and one of the things, bills that I am introducing, I have introduced, pushing to get it passed. As these small businesses are reopening, they're paying a tremendous amount of money for PPEs. So if you're a barbershop or a beauty salon or a restaurant, there are certain things that you have to have, make revisions within your facility to be compliant to open. And so there should be a tax credit for that because it's no fault of their own, it's additional cost. And so my bill would say $25,000 um, per small business, they will get a tax credit for. Food security, insecurity, I should say. Who thought that this pandemic would expose how people are living from paycheck to paycheck?
Mm-hmm.
And the loss of employment immediately went to a food insecurity. And the food lines have just been just, surprising to me. But the reality, in order to live, you have to have food. And so we will be putting money into the food banks and to these nonprofits that are providing food in our community. And it will maximize SNAP benefits as well for those who are living in poverty. The census, the highways. So this Heroes Bill covers a lot that we need. I often talk about the disparity in healthcare that was exposed by the COVID virus, the disparity in access to broadband, the educational gaps that we are seeing that we never thought a lot about. We send children home every day in America, and we, with the expectation that they can do research online, that they can supplement their education through the educational foundation of the internet. And so many children don't have that.
U.S. Representative Brenda Lawrence with us on the Oakland County Megacast all across the Oakland County area on a family of community television and radio stations. Representative Lawrence, with this HEROES Act potentially coming down the pike, and it's in the works as we speak, hasn't been passed fully just yet. Any concerns similar to what we saw with the Federal CARES Act in terms of the distribution of these funds? Because even Senator Peters yesterday had mentioned some stark disparities in the distribution of this aid between states,
Yes.
Especially in terms of hospital aid. Any provisions in place to prevent a similar issue that created such competition between states, so to speak, especially early on?
So one of the glaring disparities was the ability of larger companies who have resources inside, HR resources that, or a financial department that could whisk right through the application. And then on top of that, they had relationships with banks where some of the small businesses, they conduct their business just like we do. They go, they deposit their money, they write a check, they sometimes never go inside the bank. And so we changed funding, amended it so that there were designated funds for small businesses. And we expanded financial institutions to credit unions and small independent banks so that they would have the ability to loan this money out, and it was there in the communities. And so therefore we anticipated the ability of these small businesses to navigate through it. We extended, excuse me, just recently extended the payback period, which the small business were saying this is we can't pay the money back because we haven't even opened up. And so we extended that, and that was the Senate agreed with that, and that was a really good thing because there was a lot of stress for the small business who needed the loan, but unfortunately, because of this virus, hadn't even had the opportunity to start making money again, and they would not be able to pay it back.
Representative Lawrence, we're not entirely even through this disaster, but in terms of preparation for what may come next, the next unpredictable disaster that we don't know how long it's going to take to recover from, are there any requirements being put in place on a federal level for better preparation or preparing some sort of network of distribution of resources within the country to reduce reliance on foreign aid, especially if we're facing a similar worldwide dilemma in the future?
Mm-hmm. I will use a major disclaimer. When you start talking about federal issues and international relationships, we are held hostage to whoever who is in the White House. So a lot of the policies and things that happened was a direct relationship to the policy of this current administration. There were some things that were very notable. One was the lack of efficiencies in our um, federal agencies to disperse unemployment benefits to the Small Business Administration. The website collapsed within a few hours when we opened up for funding to go to our business community. And so I sit on government oversight, and my job is to have oversight over our federal government. And those are some things that were very glaring. The inability of Small Business Administration for our unemployment federal agencies that were just still, there's still people telling me today that they haven't received their unemployment benefits, which is horrible. Also, when we looked at how we empower FEMA during a time like this, the cross connections and people bumping into each other when it came to ordering medical supplies, and something that we're so committed to in America to never be held in a position that we have to depend on foreign countries for our medical supplies. We found out we made no medical PPEs here in America. We didn't make masks, we didn't make gloves, we did not make gowns, we did not make the facial shields. We had none of that made in the United States. And it is a deliberate process and activity happening to start building and empowering and manufacturing of these items so that we'll never be held hostage again. It was deplorable that we were fighting among each others and people were charging us, other countries, excessive funds because we needed them to keep people alive. And so we learned a lot from this. And your point is very, very timely, is that will we be prepared the next time? Where is it that we rely upon the president to invoke a national emergency, or we are held hostage to the World Health Organization sharing proper information, and now the president has decided to pull out of the World Health Organization, which I do not agree with. But this is a very timely discussion because we found that we need to do a lot more.
Can I ask you a quick question? How do you think this pandemic is going to impact the upcoming election?
We have seen in this primary long lines up to midnight for people waiting to vote. We have seen cities or states close polling sites because, for various reasons, they said we couldn't get enough poll workers, or we see people are afraid to come out to the polls because of the pandemic. And so, change the way we vote, going to a poll, having multiple polling locations has changed not only in Michigan but across the country. There will be more vote by mail, and I actually encourage, if you are an elderly person, if you are a person that is have a handicap and cannot wait in long lines, please take advantage of early voting. Our postal service is more critical than ever because right now, with voting by mail, it is literally the postal service protecting our democracy and ensuring that the mail is flowing timely and that our mail is protected. And so I see um, in this country voting by mail and then the response time to get our election results. In the state of Michigan, the Secretary of State and some city and some clerks have asked for a change in our state law. The law currently says that when you send in an absentee ballot, that you cannot open it or count it until election day. And that's why it takes so long to get your absentee results. And in this environment where we're anticipating possibly half or more of the residents in Michigan will be voting by absentee ballot, that we're allowed to open the ballots, stage them, and get them ready at minimum. So when election day comes, they can just start feeding them into the ballot readers and the counters, and so that would cut down on that amount of time to get the election results.
U.S. Representative Brenda Lawrence from the 14th Congressional District with us on the Oakland County Megacast. Representative Lawrence, Oakland County and the city of Pontiac have been doing a lot lately to expand testing and other resources to this highly minority-populated community that, like many other minority communities, have been hit much harder than most communities
Yes,
by the pandemic.
disproportionately.
Absolutely.
Yes.
On a federal level, is our country doing enough to battle this disparity in the effects that the pandemic has had on these communities and help provide help needed to these communities to keep them safe and healthy as the pandemic continues?
So I want to be really clear that when we saw this disparity, myself, I called the doctors, the hospitals, said, what is happening? Why are minorities, African Americans, dying so at a disproportionate rate? And the statement was, well, they have more underlying conditions, diabetes, hypertension, so they're going to die more. And it was like business as usual. Whoa, wait, that's not acceptable in America, that a certain group of people are going to die more. And so we start peeling back the layers of the onion here. What is happening? So we know that access to health care is extremely important, and we have community health centers. And people who are uninsured, it's disgusting that we're having our only option to have insurance for every American. The Affordable Care Act, a tax being made on that without a replacement. Access to health care, food, nutrition. Um, if you are poor and you live in an urban area, your access to food, if you don't have a car, or even if you want to ride a bus, your access to food is very limited and it's not healthy. And if you're poor and you go to the grocery store and you buy chicken, broccoli, and some potatoes, that's going to cost you about $20, right? But if you go to Wendy's or McDonald's, you can get a Happy Meal for $1 and feed your children. And so you go to the corner store, which is usually not a grocery store, and you go in there, it's only canned foods, which is high in sodium. There's no fresh vegetables. Um, and so when you're gathering the things that are accessible to you to feed your family, it is not nutritious. And then obesity, um, diabetes, and other issues that come into play. And so there's so many layers to this. And so we asked in Congress, the Black Caucus led this initiative to demand that the Department of Health, CDC, first of all, we wanted them to take the data. So one of the things, the other thing that came up, we had these people who were dying and they were like unidentified. How are they unidentified? You don't know their race. But on a death certificate, you put the race. But when you're recording this for the CDC and for other federal agencies, there was no race put on it. And so we did the inquiry, and then we said, the Black Caucus said, you must gather this data by race. Then secondly, you must publish this report to the public. There's so many, I can tell you, being a member of Congress and interacting with these agencies, there's so much data that's gathered and it's not released to the public. So many of us was taken off guard, like, what is happening? Why are all these people dying disproportionately? And so they must gather it by race. They must make a report. And then what is the plan to fix it? How do we reduce all of these layers and layers that is impacting the health of minorities?
Representative Lawrence, Governor Whitmer at a recent press conference announced a four-pronged plan for potential police reforms in the state of Michigan. You, on the federal level, have been behind the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. Can you give us a little bit of information on what that act entails and what that would do to change or make some of these necessary reforms in the country?
So what has been so amazing to me is that, the cry for Black Lives Matter has not been limited to only African Americans. When we as a country witnessed the death of George Floyd by the knee of a police officer, I mean, regardless of your religion, your sex, or your color, or your ethnicity, as an American, we said this is unacceptable. We are not going to allow this to happen in our country. So you see all the people of this country marching together in every single state in the United States. There were protests. And so what we have said in the George Floyd Policing and Justice and Policing Act is that you cannot use your knee as a way to apprehend a suspect or whatever when you're in policing. So it bans the chokehold. Why was there a difference between the Senate and the House? The Senate said that they recommend you don't use it. We said it will be illegal for a police officer to use the chokehold, where you're using your arm, your knee, or your foot to cut off the ability to breathe through your neck in a policing situation. We are mandating training. We are mandating that to prohibit the no-knock warrant, which we know killed Breonna Taylor, where you have the ability as a police officer to kick down a door, bust into someone's home without a warrant. We are also saying that, and this is something that was lost on so many people, the police officer who took the life of George Floyd was teaching. He was teaching those two other police officers. They were new to the force, and he was training them. So you talk about generational policing that is of this matter. And then on top of that, the person who is training had multiple citations and um, filings against him for excessive force. Normally, when a person is picked to train, he or she is picked because they're exemplary. They are the ideal employee, and you want all your employees to be just like them. And unfortunately, the accountability for all of the accusation complaints and actual and department citations on excessive force was nothing. So, what the George Floyd bill will require a national register maintained by the FBI when there are complaints of excessive force against police officers so that we can monitor that and have accountability. The last thing I wanted to mention, the federal law currently says that if there is a accusation of excessive force or death, like we had here, the judge will ask the police officer, did you willfully, did you wake up this morning and say, I'm going to kill someone today? And you know what? That is my desire, my will, that I take the life of George Floyd today. Any officer say, no, that was not my intent. I didn't wake up this morning and say I wanted to kill someone. I took his life, but that was not what I intended to do. So we are changing the law to say, did you knowingly? There is no way that you can put your knee on the neck of a human being for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and think that that person who are crying out that I cannot breathe. You have two other officers there with you who he waved off. He saw the man stop moving where his life left his body and just looked down at him and kept his knee on his neck. He knew he was taking the life from this man's body. And we need to change that because that's not even the law that says a police officer knowingly. So if I bust into a home and start shooting people all in the privacy of their home, did you knowingly know that you could injure or kill somebody by doing that? Absolutely. But now the federal law would not hold them accountable for it.
Representative Brenda Lawrence, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And for everyone, please be safe. Wear your mask, not only for you, but for everyone, for me, for children, so that we can cut down on this virus spread.
Absolutely. Representative Brenda Lawrence with us on the Oakland County MegaCast.